Well, my hope is that we don't see the errors of the previous hotel quarantine scheme, but it's a huge boon to have Melbourne Airport International back and operating, because one of the big challenges we've had in getting returning Australians home has been having the second largest airport in the country essentially shut off. That's one of the reasons why so many Australians left overseas, and we want to get them home. We want to get them home safe, and we want to get them home before Christmas.
Well, the PM had wanted them all home by Christmas, but that's surely not going to happen. There's too many.
Well, we've succeeded in getting more than we originally had planned, but more Australians now have wanted to come home. The original expectation was, I think, around 30,000. We've got more than that back. But having Australia's second largest airport shut down was the biggest barrier, frankly, to getting returned Australians home. So that's good, and we look forward to more flights arriving.
But don't you think Christmas is probably a bridge too far at this stage?
Well, I've always said that, I want to get as many Australians home as early as possible. Now that we have Australia's second largest airport open, we want to get as many people home before the end of the year. Of course, there'll be people who want to come home next year as well.
When would you like to see caps increased?
Well, I think that's a decision that's got to be made between state and Commonwealth governments. But the fact that we now have Australia's second largest airport back up and operational has made it possible to see more Australians return home, which will probably, which will greatly assist return levels and mean there may not need to be much of an adjustment in caps.
So perhaps would you like to see it in other states? New South Wales, Queensland. New South Wales had that blip over the weekend, but generally it's done pretty well. Would you prefer to see those caps increased before it happens to Victoria, given that Victoria is only just getting itself up and running again?
Well, let's see where Victoria gets to before making sort of statements about what should happen with caps. But having Australia's second largest airport back up and operational means we can get more Australians home. It was the biggest barrier we faced in getting Australians left overseas, and that's provided a very clear pathway to do so.
Do you think the government should consider a national facility to be able to take on more return travellers, something a bit bigger than Howard Springs?
Well, again, we had Australia's second largest airport closed for returning Australian travellers. That's meant it's been harder to get the volume of Australians returning home. We now have a clear pathway, not just through Melbourne, not just through Sydney, and of course other airports as well. So the need to go and build a new bit of infrastructure to deal with what we hope is ultimately a relatively temporary in the history of the country problem or challenge, I think is yet to be justified. Let's see how Melbourne goes. Let's get those flights back. Let's get those Australians home, because having Melbourne Airport closed has been a huge barrier to getting Australians returned.
Okay. Just on to workplace reforms, that's up this week. We've got about 2.6 million casual employees in Australia. If those casual employees are upgraded to permanent staff, do you believe that business can afford that? Well,
these laws have been introduced off the back of a High Court decision which has made interpretations which were not consistent with the traditional understanding of what casualised labour was and the benefits they've got, which raised the risks that some people were essentially getting double paid for some parts of their salary and their income. And so, of course, what we need is an IR environment where workplaces are flexible, where people can get jobs, because, of course, a lot of people want flexible work. Not everybody. Some people want, they want a permanent arrangement. But often you'll find people who want temporary work. It works for businesses, it works for employees, and we want them to be able to get the work versus the alternative, which is not having a job at all.
But business still holds the key here, right? Because if business, as I understand things anyway, you can disagree with this, but if business believes that it's financially unreasonable to be able to upgrade, if you like, casual staff to permanent staff, then they're just not going to do it. So that kind of dovetails into Sally McManus's argument that this will entrench a casualised workforce. So does she have a point in that sense?
But absolutely not. That's precisely why we've introduced in this bill a pathway for business to have confidence and to make sure they're not having to double pay staff because there's been this disruption by the High Court about the terms and conditions of what casual labour is. What we want to do is make it as easy as possible for Australian businesses to employ Australian workers so people have jobs, because that's the foundation of our economic success. And of course, there will be some people who want permanent, ongoing work. There'll be people who want casual work, from students to sometimes mums who, might manage it against, dropping kids off at school, or dads doing exactly the same thing. So everybody's circumstances are different. That's why IR laws should reflect people's life choices.
Okay, just finally onto the Foreign Relations Bill, which is expected to pass this week. Do you expect that there may well be some blowback from China this week?
I don't think so. I think in the end, this is not just looking at deals that are done with one country. It's a framework to review treaties and mechanisms from across every country, and that's the basis in which it was introduced.
But do you think that Victoria's Belt and Road initiative or agreement should be the first on the chopping block?
Well, I've always raised concern about it, and I look forward to Daniel Andrews defending his deal and the basis in which it should be honoured when it's been clear there hasn't been the consultation with the Commonwealth and with Canberra and with the Department, and he's never really answered for that.
Well, just on that, and Labor's saying this morning, and Labor has said on the weekend too, that there needs to be greater consultation between the two major political parties in Australia when it comes to China. What do you say to that?
Well, that's what the Parliament is for. We have discussions and debates on the floor of the House of Representatives and in the Senate on these issues. Now, I'm not going to comment on any private meetings that may or may not occur or should not occur. The main thing is to make sure that both of our major political parties, those that are the choices of government, are ultimately advancing and advocating for Australia's interests. Now, there's division in the Labor Party about China and the Chinese Communist Party. We see that from Joel Fitzgibbon versus Richard Marles versus Penny Wong. And so I think they've got to sort out their own house before they talk about bridging any difference of opinion between the government and the opposition.